Hello and welcome to today's or this afternoon's documentary masterclass with myself, David Dehaney, and Kim Duke. I run a company or creative director of a company called Proper Content. We make predominantly social purpose documentary films, series, and a few formats as well. I'm here with Kim, esteemed producer. She's a director and series editor, and her credits range for a lot of credits, critically acclaimed factual films and series for Netflix. It's a long list. Netflix, Apple, Warner, Sky, Amazon, CNN, BBC, Channel 4, and ITV. The credits range from things like Victoria Beckham on Netflix, Breakpoint also, even feature-length true crime documentaries, including JonBenet Ramsey, What Really Happened, drama documentary series, First Ladies, and highlights of which we're going to have a look at in a minute. As usual, we'll be taking questions from you guys as we go, so just pop your hand up whenever you're ready and we'll try and get to you. We're going to start with two clips, which are put together. The first one is from Victoria Beckham, and it's going to fade to black because there are two clips which are taken from different parts of the three-part series. And that's your latest project, isn't it? Would you like to?
It is. So this is for those that don't know, it's a three-part documentary series following Victoria. It's about her journey in fashion, how she got into the fashion industry, and she was putting on a show last year in Paris as part of Paris Fashion Week, and that was then the most ambitious show that she'd done. So there's a sort of verite storyline following her and how she put the collection on, and then also her backstory. So both of which strands you'll see in the clips.
Okay, great. Can we roll the VT?
In popular culture, Victoria was a wag. She was posh. The fashion industry didn't like her.
The industry can be a little snobbish.
We wanted to cross that line. You want to be taken seriously.
I knew that to start this new chapter of my life, I had to change. Strip the other personas away. You know, I buried those boobs in Baden-Baden. I became a simpler, more elegant version of myself, and I went to work.
From the top where she is, I had to bring her back to the bottom to learn.
He really challenged me.
If you want to be a designer, you have to know who you are. Who was the customer of Victoria? Is a woman who wanted to be like her. She was the product.
Ultimately, it really was about what I couldn't find. I wanted the perfect dress, and I couldn't find what I was looking for. I don't sketch, but I did start by draping on myself. You know, we didn't have the budgets to have fit models, so I used my own body. I remember standing there in the mirror, in my underwear, with Roland, and just bits of fabric.
A dress is that little movement that you have to do with the skirt.
And he just kept saying, perfect the dress. He made me question everything, every decision that I made. I used to cry a lot.
If you're not tough with Victoria, Victoria Beckham will walk over me. Nobody know your voice. How do you make it yours?
He gave me the tools that I needed to create. I was doing what I finally wanted to do.
We didn't know if she was going to succeed, but she was ready for this challenge.
I didn't need to say, hey, look at me anymore. This creative outlet, that can do the talking.
Good morning.
Liz, Mia, Layla.
Let's have a walk.
I think she's cute.
Yes. Yes.
Wait.
Espera un momentito, que te vamos a probar algo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have 40 girls to cast, 40 looks. The atelier then have to make the clothes fit perfectly on each model.
No, all the machines turned off.
And the universe went, no.
So yes, the fuse has blown.
Not today.
We're trying to get an enormous amount done in a very short space of time. We're not going to sleep a lot this week.
Absolutely. Let's do the trouser as well. Can you grab the various knitwear options?
It's so late at night, outside, just in one space. Normally the girls walk from room to room. This is the first time I'm showing as a house with fashion and beauty and fragrance all together. It's definitely the most stressful show we've ever done. There's so much that could go wrong.
Are you going to attach it at the bottom?
I've been cross-questioning every single decision in my head.
So we have 4 there. Okay. 1, 2, 3 of those.
Yeah. Everything has to be perfect. It's got to be best in class before I put it out there. So there's never any compromise. And I've spent years building this foundation.
So what was your role on that series?
So it's a good question for those that you don't know. So I was the series edit producer, or it's often called a series editor as well. So people use them interchangeably. On a series like that, I don't know whether you know, but filming is continuing. We had a year to make it, which sounds like a long time, but it isn't for a series of this kind. So the director, Nadia Halgren, was out in the field still shooting with the series producer. And so what you're doing as the series edit producer or the series editor, you're overseeing the films in the edit. So you're putting together the films, you're responsible for the kind of the series arc, and you're working with the producers or the edit producers who are working on those individual episodes. And you're crafting those narratives, both the sort of verite narrative of the fashion show and how she's preparing for that and everything, and also the backstory, what we call the backstory. So that's retrospective storytelling, looking into various points in her life, pivotal moments and stuff, how she became the person that she is. So you're working with all of those elements, and that's going on in tandem while filming continues. And often on, somebody like Victoria Beckham, okay, she's a celebrity and she's, in the public eye and everything, but she's no different to anybody else if you're doing something of this kind, contributors, it's a relationship with the contributor, and they will open up and trust you more and everything as the process continues. So often you're getting some of your best material towards the back end when you're actually trying to lock the films and lock the series. So you have to then, you're moving material around, or you're reconsidering certain storylines and things like that. So you're constantly reworking the material.
So how do you get to a role like a series editor on a really big series like Victoria Beckham? Where did you start, and what was your journey all the way here?
Okay, yeah. So I actually started out as a journalist. So this was in the time of, there were still kind of paid for regional newspapers, and I didn't like the job I was doing and decided I really wanted to be a journalist. So I actually chucked my job in, and I thought I was just going to give it a shot. And I went to, I asked to do work experience on a newspaper on the South East London Mercury, which is a brilliant news patch. Anyway, and I did a couple of weeks work experience, and I was very fortunate they took me on as a trainee. So I worked they sent me off and paid to I did the training and everything, worked on paper for a couple of years, and then you qualify. And then after a couple of years, I decided I wanted to get into television, because it was just a kind of richer way of telling stories, I suppose. You had pictures and sound and music and everything else. So so my way in was via current affairs television. And so I worked for some regional ITV companies on, things like political programmes, current affairs programmes, and eventually got a job at the BBC and BBC Current Affairs. and I worked on a sort of sister program to Panorama. And then, the last bit is I absolutely, I huge respect for journalism and journalists and everything, now more than ever. But increasingly in current affairs, I became more interested in the craft of filmmaking. So, shots and character and narrative and all of that kind of stuff, and necessarily in current affairs because they're often issue driven and or investigative or whatever. Those are the things that were left out. So I thought I really want to get into documentaries, and I then moved across into documentaries at the BBC.
And was that easy to do? Was it the same principles, or did you have to relearn?
No, similar. As I say, I think the things that they were interested in documentary were often the things that were left on the cutting room floor in current affairs. So it's a twist of, but I was already interested in those things. So yes, but it's not. No, I mean it's not automatic. But I mean a lot of documentary. I mean a lot of the stuff you do, for instance, it is very journalistic. It is. So those skills they're
similar.
They're very similar. It's all storytelling at the end of the day.
In the end, it's not the same for everyone now. Local papers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wow. How do people make their way through now, do you think?
No, I mean I think I was so fortunate because I mean journalism is having to work on a paper was just such a brilliant grounding. You're chuffed out. You have to talk to people from all walks of life. You never know what you're going to be sent out on and all that kind of stuff. I mean, now I think there's lots of different ways into document. That was my way. There are lots of different ways into documentary. I mean, some people come in via a sort of specialist knowledge or a specialism. You might be a science specialist or an art specialist or history or something like that. That can be a way in. I mean, also, if you've got some brilliant access to something or a character or whatever, that's production companies are always hugely interested in hearing about that.
We are.
That's a way in. There's just, I think it's, I think you've got to try and identify the sort of the documentaries that you want to make.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of different kinds of documentaries, and try and target those companies that make those kinds of films or series, and see what you can bring to the table. That might be specialist knowledge, access, etc.
Do remember, everyone, if you've got any questions, there's a chat just over here. And is there anyone else got any questions? And what lessons do you think people can learn on the way up whilst we're...
On the way, do you mean to get in?
Yeah.
I think you've got to be really determined, politely determined. It's not easy. I think it's an incredibly rewarding job. You're never bored. It's fascinating. It's like, I think it's a real privilege telling people stories, but it's really tough. And I mean, that's what I learned as you have to get the door slammed in your face quite a lot of times. Particularly as a journalist or whatever. Not everybody's going to say yes, but
most of the time.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop. When you get in, it continues. So you do have to be. I think you have to be resilient. You have to be determined. But I think if you really want to do it, you've got to go for it.
I think we have another question.
Yeah, I'm Dom. I'm from University of West London. I want to know, are there any documentaries that you really want to make or want to see made? And what's your process for deciding if something is worth having a documentary made about it?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure that I don't know whether we get to decide it anymore. I mean, there's all, as a filmmaker, there's all sorts of things that, you may or may not be interested in. I mean, the big thing is getting commissions now in documentary, unless you're self-funded, which, not many people are. So you have to convince a commissioner of the worth of your idea and why it should be made and everything else, and they have to really want to commission it and put it on the channel or the streamer. And it's a very, very tough process at the moment. I'd say that's the hardest.
That's the hardest bit.
Gig in telly at the moment, I'd say.
Well, we have, so in our production company, I'd say we'd have got about 30 documentaries that we'd love to make at the moment, that we're actively pitching and discussing to all the platforms or the broadcasters and so on. I imagine if we're lucky, 2 will get through.
Okay.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take it. I'm going to take one more question, then we're going to move on.
Hello, Kim. Hi. I'm just wondering, have you made any documentaries where your creative editorial control was really limited? And how do you approach that?
Do you mean from the point of view of the people taking part, or the?
No,
or-
your editing of what you've filmed and how much you can. Do the contributors ever have any say? Like Victoria Beckham, for example.
Oh, I see. No, right. Okay. So you're asking, did Victoria Beckham have any editorial control? Yeah.
Any others?
Yeah. Actually, no. I mean, she's on record as saying she didn't have editorial control. I mean, there is a process in documentary where, often as filmmakers, we will show contributors the documentary or the series beforehand, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. But that isn't about having editorial control. That's also that there's an opportunity to discuss things, obviously to correct anything that's factually inaccurate or misrepresentative or whatever, even if that isn't intentional. But you would do that with a contributor, whether it's Victoria Beckham or anybody else. But no, she's absolutely on record saying she didn't have editorial control. And it was, I think, control is very much part of her narrative. She didn't have, she had very little control over what was written and said about her when she was very young. And she's talked quite frankly in the documentary series about the effect that had on her. She sort of had to develop her kind of mechanism for coping with that, and she put up a front and stuff. I mean, awful things written and said about her, quite vile, very misogynist. And I think also the series is kind of, she for years she was defined by a 4-year period in her life, really, when she was in the Spice Girls. I mean, she's been in fashion for nearly 20 years now, but she's spent those 2 decades trying to get out from under those preconceptions that she's a sort of former pop star or Mrs. David Beckham and not very much else. So control has been, I think, is a big part of her narrative, to the extent that she also, because she couldn't control a lot of what was being said about her, she developed an eating disorder. She could control her weight. That was the one thing that, she said she could control at that time, and she was doing it in a very, very unhealthy way. But to answer your question, did she have editorial control? No, she didn't. Is that?
Documentaries are fundamentally trust-based. So the organisation or the person who takes part, they have to trust you fundamentally, beyond any agreement or any red lines or anything like that. They have to fundamentally trust you to give a fair and honest portrayal of the part of their life that you want to highlight. So shall we move on to the next clip?
Yeah.
Traders.
Yes.
2-part documentary series. I actually loved this one when it came out, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I did the first one. The second one was done by a colleague. So this was looking at everyone's kind of favourite villain, the financial trader. And it was so we were looking at financial traders in London, New York, Chicago and Amsterdam. And there was quite a lot of access involved, because I think the clip that you're about to see is on the Chicago, the trading floor of the Chicago Board of Trade. And it's kind of, they do this crazy open outcry trading, which I don't think they do anymore. But we also filmed with a hedge fund manager and a Wall Street trading company, and also some trainees who were trying to learn how to trade and everything. And this clip that you're about to see is Bob. He's a cattle futures trader or something.
But yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, can we have a look?
Yeah.
Having placed his trades for the day on the computer, Bob now ventures into the pit for the last half hour of trading. It's the only time when there's still enough business to make it worth his
10
while.
on 200, in case you want to get out of them. 10 on 300.
Most trades are done in the final minute, as traders try to get in and out of positions before the closing price is set for the day.
Bye, 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 bye.
Bob thinks he's just missed out on a profitable trade because of a misunderstanding about price.
Jeff, what did we do? When there was more trade in the pit, it didn't feel quite as significant, but people are really scrambling, and there is an element of panic. This trade, that's it.
Having lost out in the pit, Bob now checks the closing price to see how the trades he placed in the office have done.
Where did it settle at? 27? 32 it settled at? Fuck, we should have been selling these.
Bob's strategy for the day has been wrong. The market has moved in the opposite direction and he's bought when he should have sold.
I'm a fucking idiot. Yeah, it's fucking brutal. Pardon my... Yeah, so what are you gonna do? There's always tomorrow.
Bob's computer trades have cost him an entire week's earnings.
All the profits I had up to this point were gone after today's close. I'm not happy, but it's not gonna ruin my day. If you can't deal with it, then you're in the wrong business. I had this little thing when I was trading a lot, and I would have like a relatively bad day. I would go buy something. Just something that was not super extravagant, but at least it kind of reminded me that I wasn't broke and I wasn't as big as an idiot as I felt like after I walked off the trading floor. For me, bad days were very emotional. I assume they are for other guys too, and I'm not really sure why. It feels very personal when you lose money.
Access.
Access, yeah. The access, there was a lot of access on this because of the different, Chicago Board of Trade, hedge fund company, and all this kind of stuff. And it was very much I think a lot of the access was secured even before I came on as the director. And it was hard access to get because at that time, obviously because of the public perception of people who worked in finance was that they were, greedy and had no intrinsic worth and everything else. So why should they let the likes of us in? So that was it was tricky. And I think the other thing to say about that is that access is everything, isn't it? In documentaries, it's absolutely everything. And whether you're a small team or a big team, everybody's responsible for maintaining that access as well. It's not just access is never a kind of one and done. It's like, you often hear people say we've got the access, but that's just the start of it. And, every time you film or even when you're not filming, you've got to maintain that relationship, whether with, sometimes it's institutional access, so it's, like that, but you're also with your contributors. And everyone on the team is responsible for that. It only takes somebody to, I don't know, make somebody worry or worried about something. So everyone on the team carries a responsibility for the access. So yes, there was a lot to secure there. And then also you're trying to, you do a lot of research, you spend time with your contributors before you even start to film, just observing even, so that you get a really good understanding of their process and everything else. And so that they will obviously trust you and want to open up to you and everything else. And they as you say, it's a relationship. And you see Bob there, he's quite vulnerable. He's lost all his money. But again, it's not, it's about contributors understanding that, we don't want to make them look like, it's not about making them look like idiots or anything. It's actually, I think, always interesting in documentary when you can subvert people's expectations. So most people's view of financial traders was that, it's like we all hated them. And actually, they're a really interesting, fascinating bunch of people, and they're not all sort of evil villains. So,
but in the beginning, why did they want to take part? Because that's always the big conversation at some point.
So I think it varied. I mean, we filmed with a hedge fund manager. She was a fascinating character, actually. Incredibly sort of should be highly unusual as a woman at that point in hedge funds, because I don't women running hedge funds at all. And there was this notion that you wouldn't trust a woman to invest your money and everything. And I think I think part of her motivation for taking part, for instance, was that she wanted to, get the message out that actually, particularly for women, money's power. Managing your own money is independence and power and everything else. So I think they had, potentially different reasons. Also because of this, I suppose, misconception that they're, that's kind of society's pariahs and they don't have any kind of intrinsic worth, which is not true.
So you're a director on this one?
Oh, yeah.
You're a director. So what were your responsibilities on this one as the PD?
So, yeah, I mean, directing, we were lucky. So we've shot with, so we worked with DOPs, but we also had other producers self-shooting as well. I was directing. So all the interviewing, shots, sequences, I've as a director, I've always taken everything that I've worked on through the edit.
Yep.
That isn't always the case nowadays, and we can come on to that. But yes, you start from the beginning and you fashion that, with your team, you fashion that, your film arc and
the whole story.
The whole story, yeah.
Has anyone got any questions? So it's just over here, loaded in blue. And at the back, that's with the hand up.
Hi, my name's Kim.
Oh, you're another Kim?
Yes, hello. Hi. So I work for an organisation, charity called British Forces Broadcasting Service.
Yeah.
And I have my students around today as well. It's interesting because we're currently covering the documentary module in the course. So my question to you is, with streaming platforms changing documentary production, how are you adapting your storytelling techniques?
Oh, so the question is, with the rise of streamers, has that affected the way you tell stories?
Yes.
That's a really, really good question. I would say that streamers they get very nervous when it's a kind of open-ended story, where there isn't an ending. And I'm sure Dave
they want
can
all the
sort of
story up, all the details.
Testify to that. Whereas terrestrial broadcasters may have been, I'm not sure about now, but may have been more willing to go with something that was open-ended. There's money but time and everything else, and you don't want to commit to something where it's a complete risk. I think investigative programs are different. I think that's a slightly different thing. But I'd say I think that the big difference now is that even if they loosely called follow docs now, aren't they? They never used to be called observational filming. But it was never about just kind of going out and filming what happened. You always would have to, you're always making a film. And I think that it comes down to thinking really carefully about your story, your characters and your narrative. And I think you have to be able to, even with films that are, where there could be several endings, you have to have thought that through. Do you see what I mean? So you can make that film work, whatever happens. And I think that really helps you as a filmmaker. And I think it's really, really important in documentary. I mean, I worked on a big Netflix series of sports doc, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But, you have to be able to change and adapt your narrative to what's happening to your characters and everything. And essentially, find meaning in that. And that's what we have to lean into in that's the most interesting thing about documentary, isn't it? It's the realness and the authenticity. So, but it means that you have to be, you have to have really good storytelling chops, so that you have to have thought through the different permutations. Well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? How does that affect my character and the narrative? What are we saying about that? Does that answer your question? I think just on the last point, though, I think streamers are much more nervous about commissioning things that are open-ended. So I think you have to do a lot more work now to try and ensure that there will be an ending, even if you don't know which one it is.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
you know, with streamers, a lot of the documentaries got to sit alongside really big budget dramas. So in the same way they need to know exactly where they're going, where the cliffhangers are, where all the beats are. No secrets. They got to know it up front. Well, there was another question. Yes.
So, hi, I'm Karina. I'm from the University of Gloucestershire. What's one piece of advice you would wish someone had told you when you first started out?
Oh, gosh. In documentary?
Yeah, in documentary.
Oh, God.
Tricky one, isn't it?
It is tricky.
Good question.
One piece of advice. I can think of lots of advice. I mean, I don't know about one piece of advice, and I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question really well, but I mean, just sort of picking up from the last question, I think with experience, as you get more experienced in storytelling, I mean, I suppose I've always kind of written scripts, which is probably not it's probably not the norm or usual for some filmmakers, but I always have, because I think it forces you to really think carefully about what your film is about. Do you see what I mean? So that you're not always trying to do that at the back end of the process, that you really think about that, because I think if you can, it's a ruthless process, isn't it? Filmmaking, it really forces you to interrogate what you're saying and what your ideas are and what's the meaning of your film. And I think as a sort of younger filmmaker, that's the thing that you're often figuring out in an edit, which isn't, of course, you know, the edit, the film will kind of take on a different life in the edit as well. But you don't want to be figuring everything out at the last minute. You sort of want to be putting in that work up front as well. I think that isn't something that you always think about when you first start out.
I would say be ready for a lot of rejection, because it's nothing personal, but there's a lot of good ideas out there, and a lot of people trying to get their ideas made. But if you're resilient and keep going, you'll get there in the end, I think. Is there any more, or shall we? Was there one more? Just here.
Hi, my name's Ben Russell, and I'm an intern at Pinewood Studios. I have a question for you, Kim. On your profile on the sheet, it said one of your documentaries that you worked on was Drive to Survive, which is important to me because at the moment I'm doing a self-funded documentary about motorsport engineers, and I'm curious, in the negotiation phase of talking to your contributors, what are some like green flags or any advice to sort of get their attention for interviews?
Okay, so I did work on Drive to Survive. I was edit director, so I wasn't on the ground directing. We're going to there's one of the clips we'll show later is from the same company, Box to Box Films. Are you asking about sort of how you get access?
Yeah, how would you? Because I am at the moment talking to engineers for my documentary, but I'm trying to, at the moment, I'm looking for sort of advice, like how to sort of like really reel them in to my story.
I think, you know, I think with any kind of access, anything like that, you have to be very honest and transparent and clear about your idea, what you're trying to make, because there's no, you know, you can't trick people in any way or be dishonest about that. So you have to obviously be able to communicate the idea in a way that they think, oh, that's something that's really exciting and we want to be part of that. So it always helps if they can see some advantage to them in taking part. It may be that they want to get, you know, they want to show people what they do, or you know, I mean, Drive to Survive was ended up being fantastic for Formula One because it had a limited audience before the success of that series, and now people who don't give a monkeys about cars. Watch it. You know, it's brought a massive audience to the sport. So it's always good if in explaining your idea that they can see that would be, you know, that's something that they would like to be part of. So, but I think it's that though, and you just have to be really clear about your idea and open and transparent about it. Does that help?
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Okay, so we move on to the next clip. It's a bit of a contrast from the last two.
It is a contrast.
Historical drama doc. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so this was a series called First Ladies, and it was about it was a 6-part series, directors each making 2 films, and it was about the First Ladies and their time in the White House and how that impacted American and global history. And I had the 2 ladies in the 60s. I had Jackie Kennedy and Lady Bird Johnson, who followed the Kennedys into the White House in the most awful of circumstances after the assassination of President Kennedy. And this is, I think the clip you're about to see is when they're in the motorcade going into Dallas.
Throughout her time in the White House, Lady Bird Johnson recorded an audio diary. It's a unique insight into her life as First Lady.
Friday, November 22nd. It all began so beautifully. The sun came out bright and beautiful. We were going into Dallas.
And here they come, right down toward us. I can see Mrs. Kennedy. Then comes the Vice President and Mrs. Johnson smiling. Boy, this is something.
The Johnsons were products of Texas with outsized pride in their state.
It is my high honor to present to the good people of Fort Worth our beloved President of the United States.
Over the past year, Lady Bird has watched her husband fall into a deep depression.
Lyndon Johnson was possibly the most miserable vice president in American history. He did not like being second fiddle to anybody, not even the President of the United States.
As always, Lady Bird was there to lift him up. But LBJ had episodes of depression throughout his life in times of great uncertainty. And the one thing that LBJ was uncertain about when he was vice president to John F. Kennedy was his own political future.
Suddenly, there was a sharp, loud report, and then 2 more.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
An ISS man vaulted over the seat on top of Lyndon, threw him to the floor, and said, "Get down." The cars accelerated faster and faster. I looked up and saw hospital. Only then did I believe that this might be what it was. As we ground to a halt, Secret Service men began to hustle us out. I cast one last look back over my shoulder and saw a bundle of pink, just like a drift blossoms, lying in the back seat. I think it was Mrs. Kennedy lying over the president's body.
I was in Washington, D.C., and a young girl in my class came in saying, "I've just been listening to the radio. The president's been shot. The president's been shot."
I knelt on the floor and prayed that it wasn't going to be so because I loved President Kennedy.
President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The president is dead.
I saw a member of my father's Secret Service detail walking towards me, and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry."
Suddenly, I found myself face to face with Jackie in a small hall. I don't think I ever saw anybody so much alone in my life. I went up to her, put my arms around her, and said something like, God help us all, because my feelings far were too tumultuous to put into words.
It's very powerful. So it's quite different in many ways.
It's very different. Just to give you a little idea of the way we worked, it was very important on this series. We wanted to work from the kind of archive outwards. So, I mean, it's difficult doing, you know, drama's expensive. So, and it's easy to not do well. So we wanted to, first of all, we worked with the archives. So we were looking at these kind of pivotal moments, this being one of them. Obviously, this is how the Johnsons ended up in the White House in very unexpected circumstances. So we looked at the archive first, and then worked out how could we with first of all, we wrote the scripts, but with the scenes, how could we extend out from the archive and film the drama elements so that they kind of integrated seamlessly into those. So that's what we that's the way we kind of worked with that. And you know, I was very fortunate. There was amazing 16mm film archive, which it was great to work with that.
And the shoots were quite different to an observational documentary shoot, I imagine.
The drama shoots,
Yeah.
very, very, very different from doing observational documentary. There's a lot of, in sort of observational filming, you're often working in a much smaller unit. It's much more intimate and everything. There's a lot of people doing lots of different things on a drama shoot. You've got lots of different departments. So not only your DOP, and you've got camera, lighting, you've got hair and makeup, costume, location people. There's so many people doing different things, and it's scheduled to within an inch of its life because of the cost and everything. So it means that you have to be very, very clear about what you're shooting. Is this particular prop in this shot? Can the character, does it matter if they come from camera left or do they have to come from camera right and everything? Because, you know, it's about being very, very disciplined about what you're shooting so you can be super efficient. So also as a consequence, you're shooting the drama elements as the last thing. So once you're sort of, your documentary narrative, once you've kind of got that a bit more locked in the edit, you wouldn't shoot the drama until you've done that, because you don't want anything to be wasted. You don't want to be shooting stuff that you don't need. So you can be much, much more prescriptive about what you need. And I think actually for some of those things, we storyboarded the drama, actually used that in the documentary cut,
right,
so that the commissioners could get an idea of how the drama would play out. And then, yes, I loved doing it. We shot in, bizarrely, we shot in Norfolk, where studios up there, for some reason, have a life-size replica of the Oval Office, because I think there was a series about Nixon was made there, and they have period cars and all sorts of stuff. But we were also trying to be, because they were iconic first ladies. I mean, you know, very, very recognised, Jackie Kennedy, and you know, you think, oh gosh, you know, we also had to be, we had to shoot it in a certain way so that you weren't thinking, well, you know, actually that's not Jackie Kennedy, or it throws you out of the narrative. So we shot everything sort of three-quarter rear, and it became very much about the silhouette, the hairstyles, and, you know, shapes and things like that, or tiny period details, these kind of hero details that gave you something, but, you know, nothing sort of full face. So we were sort of trying to think really carefully about things like that as well.
Right. And actually, have we got any questions? Right. So while we're waiting, you wrote this as well? Because usually in Obdoc, you kind of, if there's any writing,
We wrote,
doing it.
we wrote it. We wrote it. Yes. Directors working on it wrote the scripts, and we were looking for kind of so that the drama was a meaningful scene. It wasn't just, you know, wallpaper, pretty pictures. There was some development in character or narrative that happened within the scenes.
Okay, can we go to our first question? And another one down here just afterwards.
Hi, my name is Bun Maloney. I'm doing a filmmaking course at UE in Bristol at the moment.
Sorry, where you? Oh, you were there. Hello, sorry, I couldn't see you.
I love hearing about the stories about problem solving and filmmaking because oftentimes that's what it is. I was wondering if you could potentially share a story about a time where a production is potentially derailed and how you got it back on track. Because oftentimes I think they turn out to be the best productions.
Where it was derailed. I don't actually have a. I mean, I think what you're saying is I'm not sure I can talk about a specific incident where it, literally the wheels came off. But I think that what you're saying is so true. I think that filmmaking, program making is you're troubleshooting all the time. All the time, because I mean, also you don't. It's not possible to. We'd all love a bigger budget, or we'd all love longer to make something, or this particular contributor, or to be able to shoot in a certain location. And pretty much every day, something in that equation isn't possible. And also, I think because you're always dealing with moving parts, particularly in documentary, we are, we've got access with contributors, but something might happen, or they're not prepared to do something that they said they were earlier, or whatever. So you're always trying to problem solve. And I think that's what, we are very creative like that as filmmakers, I think, because we're just doing it all the time. We're probably doing it when we don't even realize we're doing it. I think that's it's very much the nature of this. All the way into it carries. It's not just shooting. You carry that into the edit as well. You might have thought, oh, we can unpack the scene in this way, and actually, for some reason, it doesn't work. So you've got to find a creative way around that, and hopefully, as you say, you come out with something that is even better. And I think sometimes those situations, because they force us to come up with other solutions. They force us to be creative. That we do sometimes. I think we exceed our own expectations. We surprise ourselves. So sorry, I haven't got a wheels come off example, but anyway. But I think it's a really good point.
Well, but I think that's a good point. You said that you're so experienced you don't even realise it, because I think most productions hit a bumpy phase. Because often in documentary, you remember you're following, generally speaking, real life. So stuff that really happened to people, and life never runs smooth. So there's always going to have its moments. Just wanted to try.
Hi.
Finn, I'm at UAL at the moment in the first year. I'm wondering how you approach things that are like live. So you've gone into that with a script,
yes,
that project, and then
yes,
does the script come after? Because you shoot it live. Obviously, it's a live sporting event. It doesn't have a script live, but you then have to tell a story through that, and you antagonize characters in certain ways, and you highlight another characters. Where does that come from, and where does that lie in the production station? You as editor, how do you try tell that story through those clips?
I just want to make sure I've understood your question. Are you saying how do you work when you're doing something that's more observational, or how do you work with a script on something like we've just seen? Or
the parallels between working on a script that's come up from something that's been done live to something that was 60, 70 years ago.
Something. You mean working with the archive material?
Yeah. So you take a script from that, and you can work that out from the beginning of production, whereas something like DTS that you worked on, that comes from a script that's being made without the season going along.
Oh yes. I mean, this is we'll talk about this actually, because I worked on a series called Breakpoint, which we're
about to go to.
Which we'll come on to. So should we pick up that? Should we pick up that question when you've seen the clip? Yeah, it's a really good question.
So can we see the next clip?
One set all. This match, it's all being played to the Kyrgios tune. And Tsitsipas is the bad guy now.
It was an insane match.
Kyrgios can play tennis.
Unbelievable.
It's a fucking joke, man. Kyrgios should be defaulted.
The tennis world's kind of painted me as this crazy villain.
You know the shit that the tournament's going to get after this. And I'm here.
Ridiculous from Kyrgios.
But I love that. I thrive in those moments. I thrive in the chaos. I love to see when, you know, my opponent is more focused on me than the actual tennis.
What to say, what to say.
It's drama.
One code violation a piece and one set apiece, and on we go.
He's missed a few of those forehands today.
Tsitsipas is losing it again. Right. So there we are, second code violation, point deduction for Tsitsipas.
It was too much for me. All that anger built up so much.
He could have got a default there because he hit that hard.
Set point. There it is. Kyrgios has this third set. There really is a crucible in there now. The noise from the spectators, they are loving this.
You're all over him, mate. Use it, let's go.
Miss it there from Tsitsipas. And Tsitsipas hasn't played particularly well.
Match point.
Could have been a great match to watch, but unfortunately it got ruined and turned into a silly circus show. I'm very sad as well that it escalated that way, and I ended up getting angry.
Oh, I can't wait for this press conference, bro. I cannot wait.
I don't think he can play without having a circus around.
What did I do?
Verbal abuse?
Yeah, and I'll get fined for that. Why would I need to apologise? I'm getting fined for it.
It's constant bullying. That's what he does.
I'm not sure how I bullied him. To come in here and say I bullied him and stuff, that's just soft. Like, that's just, we're not cut from the same cloth.
He was probably a bully at school himself. You don't know what's behind. I don't like bullies.
Everything I did worked. I'm not going out there to be his friend and say, beautiful shot, Stefanos. Like, no, that's not what I'm gonna give to him. Like, I'm just gonna be myself.
Nick Kyrgios brought tennis to the lowest level. Manipulation, abuse, aggressive behaviour to umpires.
Oh my God.
Your phone blowing up?
Yeah, but I don't really want to look at it, to be honest. I've like seen these comments and I've just like, they just stay with me like it's nuts. It's crazy.
Anyways, you won today.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
See,
So that's-
Kyrgios fans.
Yeah, really unpredictable story.
Totally unpredictable. So to go back to your question, very, very unpredictable. Much more actually unpredictable than, well, actually it's less contained than something like a Formula One. And the tennis season goes pretty much all year. So the shoot teams are out on the ground following the Grand Slams and the other tournaments, and the edit team. So I was series editing. In fact, there were two of us because it's such a beast. That was like a 10-part series. So that's a lot of, it's 10 whole films to make. Each kind of standalone, but have to also work as a series arc through the season. So you're following different characters coming and going, and, you know, viewers get to know the characters and can root for them. So, and very, very unpredictable. Players at that level, you know, the margins are tiny. They can be sort of favourite to win something and be out. So you're the storyline that you've got in your head or the story arc that you've planned can suddenly be totally demolished. So I think you have to, one thing about these films and series is that it's never just about winning or losing. There's always a kind of underlying story there, and that's what, when you're thinking about your film and everything, it's like, well, what's the real story as well? So in this instance, sorry, I should have introduced the clip. This is Nick Kyrgios, for those who don't know him. He comes into, is incredibly talented player, comes into Wimbledon as a genteel Wimbledon as this kind of wrecking ball. He wants to win the tournament as a sort of middle finger to everybody, because he's always felt like an outsider, that he's never been accepted. And in that match, obviously he's playing Tsitsipas and presses all his buttons and everything. Actually, what he does is ultimately he goes on, he gets through to the final and he meets Djokovic. So it's absolutely the biggest match of his life. I think, the first set goes really well. Anyway, he sort of redeems himself. He doesn't win, but he shows himself worthy. And something happens in that process. He kind of conquers his demons, and he finally feels like he belongs at the top of tennis. And I think that there's some exchange at the end of that match that, him and Djokovic are going to go for a drink together or something. And anyway, so it's never just about winning or losing, but you have to be able to take a story like that and think about it it comes back to this thing about, you might have 3 endings. And that's why I think you have to be really nimble and agile as a storyteller, and know that there are different ways to tell stories, different ways that films develop and resolve and everything. I mean, with Kyrgios, either that could have gone either way. I suppose, if he'd won, it would have been the upset of the tournament, incredible. But actually, the outcome there was that even, he's won even though he's lost, because something changes in him. He realizes something about himself, and there's a process that he's gone through and that you follow as the viewer as well. So, and that happens, particularly if you've got a big cast of characters like that. There was another character, Taylor Fritz, an American player, who he has this amazing win early in the season, beats Rafa Nadal, he's on this big high, and then he goes into the US Open and he's absolutely the favourite to win, and they're desperate for an American male champion because men's tennis has been in the doldrums for years in America, and he completely flunks it. He plays this kind of like really junior player and just goes out, and so then that became a story about the weight of expectation. And later in the season he comes back and he gets his confidence back, and so I think, to answer your question, you have to be alive all the time to all of those possibilities. If you're, in documentary, we are dealing with real people and real emotions and, human beings, and they do that. So that you have to know how to adapt your narrative at any given point to what's happening, because that's going to be the most powerful thing, isn't it? That's the genuine or authentic thing. And if we can lean into that in docs, that's going to give us the most powerful films.
Thank you very much, Kim. I think we're out of time. That was really, really interesting, very insightful. Hope everybody got a lot from it. Thanks very much.